Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. Part 8, The Prophet, Chapter 48. 3 days after Kirsten and August became separated from the symphony, behind a garden shed in an overgrown backyard on the outskirts of Severn City, Kirsten woke abruptly with tears in her eyes. She dreamt that she'd been walking down the road with August, and she turned and he was gone, and she knew he was dead. She'd screamed his name, she'd run down the road, but he was nowhere. When she woke, he was watching her, his hand on her arm. "I'm right here," he said. She must have said his name aloud. "It's nothing, just a dream." "I have bad dreams, too." He was holding his silver Starship Enterprise in his other hand. It wasn't quite morning. The sky was brightening, but night lingered below in the shadows, gray light, dewdrops suspended in the grass. "Let's wash up," August said. "We might meet people today." They crossed the road to the beach. The water mirrored the pearl sky, the first pink of sunrise rippling. They bathed with some shampoo Kirsten had found in the last house. It left a scent of synthetic peaches on her skin and floating islands of bubbles on the lake. And Kirsten washed and wrung out her dress and put it on wet. August had scissors in his suitcase. She cut his hair. It was falling in his eyes. And then he cut hers. "Have faith," he whispered. "We'll find them." Resort hotels stood along the lake shore, the windows mostly broken and their shards reflecting the sky. Trees pushed up through the parking lots between rusted cars. Kirsten and August abandoned their suitcases, the wheels too loud on rough pavement, made bundles out of bed sheets and carried the supplies over their shoulders. After a mile or two, they saw a sign with a white airplane hanging askew over an intersection, an arrow pointed towards the center of town. Severn City had been a substantial place once. There were commercial streets of red brick buildings, flowers, riotous and planters, and the roots of maple trees disrupting the sidewalks. A flowering vine had taken over most of the post office and extended across the street. They walked as silently as possible, weapons in hand. Birds moved in and out of the broken windows and perched on sagging utility wires. August. "What? Did you just hear a dog bark?" Just ahead was the overgrown wilderness of a municipal park, a low hill rising beside the road. They climbed up into the underbrush, moving quickly, threw their bundles aside, and crouched low. A flash of movement at the end of a side street, a deer bounding away from the lakeshore. "Something startled it," August whispered. Kirsten adjusted and readjusted her grip on a knife. A monarch butterfly fluttered past. She watched it while she listened and waited, wings like bright paper. A faint buzz of insects all around them. She heard voices now and footsteps. The man who appeared on the road was so dirty that Kirsten didn't immediately recognize him, and when she did, she had to stifle a gasp. Saeed was gone. He moved slowly. There was blood on his face, an eye swollen shut. His clothes were filthy and torn, several days' beard on his face. 2 men and a boy followed a few paces behind him. The boy carried a machete. One of the men carried a sawed-off shotgun, the barrel pointed at the ground. The other held a bow, half drawn, an arrow at the ready, and a quiver on his back. Kirsten, moving very slowly, drew a second knife from her belt. "I have the gunman," August whispered. "Get the archer." His fingers crossed around a stone the size of his fist. He rose and sent it sailing in an arc over the road. The stone crashed into the wall of a half-collapsed house, and the men started, turning towards the sound just as August's first arrow caught the gunman in the back. Kirsten was aware of footsteps receding, the boy with the machete running away. The archer drew his bow, and an arrow whistled past Kirsten's ear, but the knife had already left her hand. The archer sank to his knees, staring at the handle protruding from between his ribs. A flock of birds rose up above the rooftops and settled into the sudden quiet. August was cursing under his breath. Saeed knelt on the road, his head in his hands. Kirsten ran to him and held his head to her chest. He didn't resist. "I'm so sorry," she whispered into his blood-caked hair. "I'm so sorry they hurt you." "There's no dog," August said. His jaw was clenched, a sheen of sweat on his face. "Where's the dog? We heard a dog bark." "The prophet's behind us with his dog," Saeed whispered. He's got 2 men with him. We split up to take different roads about a half-mile back." Kirsten helped him to his feet. "The archer's still alive," August said. The archer was lying on his back. His eyes followed Kirsten, but he made no other movement. She knelt beside him. She'd been He'd been in the audience when they performed A Midsummer's Night's Dream at St. Deborah by the Water, applauding in the front row at the end of the performance, smiling, his eyes wet in the candlelight. "Why did you take Saeed?" she asked him. "Where are the other two?" "You took something that belongs to us," the man whispered. "We were going to do a trade." Blood was spreading rapidly over his shirt and dripping down the creases of his neck, pooling beneath him. "We took nothing. I have no idea what you're talking about." August was going through the men's bags. "No ammunition for the gun," he said, disgusted, and it was unloaded. "The girl," Saeed said. His voice was a dry rasp. "He's talking about the stowaway." "The fifth bride," the archer whispered. "It was my duty. She was chosen." "Eleanor?" August looked up. "That scared little kid?" "She's the property of the prophet." "She's 12 years old," Kirsten said. "You believe everything the prophet says?" The archer smiled. "The virus was the angel," he whispered. "Our names are recorded in the book of life." "Okay," Kirsten said. "Where are the others?" He only stared at her, smiling. She looked at Saeed. "Are they behind us somewhere?" "The clarinet got away," Saeed said. "What about Dieter?" "Kirsten," Saeed said softly. "Oh God," August said. "Not Dieter, no." "I'm sorry," Saeed covered his face with his hands. "I couldn't." "And behold," the archer whispered, there was a new heaven and a new earth, for the heaven of the old earth had passed away." The color was draining from his face. Kirsten wrenched her knife from the archer's chest. He gasped, the blood welling, and she heard a gurgle in her throat as his eyes dimmed. In his throat as his eyes dimmed. 3, she thought, and felt immensely tired. "We heard a whimpering in the forest," Saeed said. He walked slowly, limping. That night on patrol, we were about a mile from the symphony, about to turn back, and there was a sound coming from the bushes. It sounded like a lost child. "A ruse," August said. He had a glazed look when Kirsten glanced at him. "So like idiots, we went to investigate, and the next thing I know, something's pressed over my face, a rag soaked in something, a chemical smell, and I woke up in a clearing in the woods." "What about Dieter?" It was difficult to force the words from her throat. "He didn't wake up." "What do you mean?" "Exactly that. Was he allergic to chloroform? Was it actually chloroform at all, or something much more toxic? The prophet's men gave me water, told me they wanted the girl. They decided to take 2 hostage and broker a trade. They'd guessed we were headed for the Museum of Civilization, given the direction of travel and the rumors that Charlie and Jeremy had gone there. And the whole time they're explaining this, and I'm looking at Dieter sleeping beside me, and he's getting paler and paler, and his lips are blue. I'm trying to wake him up, and I can't. I couldn't. I was tied up next to him, and I kept kicking him. Wake up, wake up. But what?" "But he didn't wake up," Saeed said. "We waited all through the following day, me tied up there and the men coming and going, and then in the late afternoon his breathing stopped. I watched it happen." Kirsten's eyes filled with tears. "I was watching him breathe," Saeed said. "He'd gone so pale, his chest rising and falling, and then one last exhale, and no more. I shouted, and they tried to revive him, but it didn't. Nothing worked, nothing. They argued for a while, and then 2 of them left and returned a few hours later with the clarinet."